Ever wonder what makes a piece of vinyl worth like a small island?
Hmm.
Today we're going to dive into the world of crazy expensive records.
Okay.
But it's not just about the price tag.
Right.
It's the stories, the history, and what makes these records so valuable, to collectors.
Yeah, it's fascinating. In our digital age with music at our fingertips, vinyl has reemerged
All right.
as this desirable, almost fetishistic object.
Yeah.
It's this tangible connection to a moment in time, to the artist, to a specific sound that digital just can't replicate.
Totally. We've got some legendary artists with records fetching insane prices, like the Beatles and Elvis.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But today we're laser focused on one record in particular,
Okay.
one that truly broke the bank and sparked a whole debate about the value of music.
All right.
You ready for this?
Hit me.
We're talking about Wu-Tang Clan's Once Upon a Time in Shaolin,
Oh wow.
the album that sold for a staggering $2 million.
That's right. And it's not just an album, it's a single copy. A unique piece of art shrouded in mystery and bound by a contract
Really?
that prevents its commercial release for 88 years.
88 years. Talk about exclusive.
Yeah.
So before we get lost in the hype,
Yeah.
can you break down what makes this record so special? I mean, beyond the obvious only one exists thing.
Well, it's about the story as much as the music. Imagine this.
All right.
The Wu-Tang Clan spent 6 years crafting this album,
Wow.
collaborating with unheard of guest artists,
Oh,
and they encased it in this handcrafted silver and nickel-plated box.
seriously?
It's like they took the concept of a limited edition and turned it up to 11.
Okay, so it's got this insane backstory.
Yeah.
But what about the music itself? Nobody can even hear it. Is it even, good?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like they turned their music into a conceptual art piece.
Okay.
By limiting access, they forced us to rethink how we value music. Is it about the experience of listening, or is it about the ownership? The possession of something rare and unattainable. It challenges the whole notion of what music is supposed to be.
It's like they created this musical enigma, and now it's more about the idea of the album than the actual sounds.
Right.
It's fascinating how they managed to generate so much buzz without anyone even hearing a single note.
Exactly. They tapped into this collector's mindset, this desire for the exclusive, the one of a kind.
Mhm.
And it's not just about music. Think about art, rare cars, first edition books. People pay exorbitant prices for things that are unique, things that represent a moment in time.
Okay, so we've got this super exclusive album locked away for almost a century.
Yep.
But let's take a step back and look at some other pricey records that tell a different kind of story.
Okay.
What about the Beatles, for instance?
Ah, the Beatles. They've got a whole catalog of records that collectors drool over.
Sure.
One that immediately comes to mind is the copy of the White Album with the serial number 0000001. It fetched almost $800,000 simply for being the first one pressed.
Just a simple serial number.
Yeah.
It's amazing how something so small can skyrocket the value. But isn't it more than just the number? It's about owning a piece of history, right?
Mm-hmm.
The very first pressing of an iconic album.
Absolutely. It's a tangible connection to the birth of that music, a relic from the moment it entered the world.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not just about being first, but about the stories attached to the record.
Like that Yesterday and Today compilation with the infamous Butcher cover. The one that was quickly recalled because it was deemed too controversial.
Exactly. That controversy actually fueled its desirability.
Really?
It became a symbol of the Beatles pushing boundaries, challenging the status quo.
Interesting.
And that rebellious spirit resonates with collectors. It's a piece of rock and roll history that captures a specific cultural moment.
Okay, so we've got first pressings and controversy adding to a record's value.
Uh-huh.
What else makes collectors shell out insane amounts of money for these pieces of vinyl?
Well, sometimes it's the personal touch, the connection to the artist.
Right.
Take, for instance, the signed copy of John Lennon and Yoko Ono's Double Fantasy album owned by Mark Chapman Lennon's assassin.
Whoa, that's heavy. A piece of music forever linked to such a tragic event.
It's a chilling example of how objects can become imbued with history, both good and bad. But it also speaks to the deep emotional connection fans have with their idols,
Yeah.
even in the face of tragedy.
Right.
Some might find it morbid, others might see it as a piece of history that, while dark, is undeniably significant.
It's like owning a piece of that story, even if it's a painful one.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. It's like Wu-Tang Clan deliberately created a record designed to become a historical artifact.
You're right. It's almost like they preloaded it with a story, with controversy, with a sense of mystery and exclusivity.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating case study in how an artist can manipulate the value of their work.
So we've got these Beatles records with historical significance, personal touches, and then this Wu-Tang album that's like a self-made historical artifact. Where do we go from here?
Well, let's move on to another icon with his own collection of valuable vinyl, Elvis Presley. His records offer a different perspective on what makes a piece of music worth a fortune.
All right, let's unpack the King's collection.
Elvis's first record, My Happiness, recorded back in 1953, is a prime example.
Okay.
He never released it commercially.
Wow.
Just a simple acetate disc he made for a friend.
Right.
And yet it sold for $300,000.
Whoa! It's mind-blowing how a single acetate disc, basically a homemade recording, can become such a sought-after treasure. What makes it so special for collectors?
Well, it's a direct link to the very beginning of Elvis's career, before he was the king,
Right.
before the fame and fortune. Imagine holding that disc in your hand knowing it was touched by Elvis himself.
Yeah.
You're holding a piece of musical history.
You're right. It's like a tangible connection to his raw talent, his
Yeah.
potential just waiting to explode.
Exactly.
And speaking of potential, let's talk about that rare test pressing of Elvis's Good Luck Charm,
Yeah.
the one with a different take on the song.
Ah, that's a gem. Test pressings are fascinating because they offer a glimpse into the creative process, the evolution of a song. It's like peeking behind the curtain
Right.
and seeing the artist at work experimenting, refining their art.
It makes you wonder how many other hidden gems are out there tucked away in private collections. Unreleased versions, alternate takes, maybe even entire albums that never saw the light of day.
That's part of the thrill of collecting, right? The possibility of discovering something truly unique, a piece of musical history that no one else has heard.
It's like being a musical archaeologist, unearthing these lost relics. But instead of dusty artifacts, you're finding these sonic treasures.
That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of treasures, Elvis's last record, Moody Blue, is another one that commands high prices, especially sealed, mint condition copies.
It makes sense. It's Elvis's final statement. His musical swan song, people want to preserve that piece of history.
Right.
Keep it pristine, untouched by time. It's like holding onto a piece of his legacy.
So we've explored these rare Beatles records, Elvis's first and last recordings,
Right.
each with their unique stories. And then we have Once Upon a Time in Shaolin, this outlier that Wu-Tang Clan created as this exclusive, almost mythical object.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about the different ways we value music, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We've seen how scarcity, historical significance, personal touches, and even controversy can contribute to a record's value.
Yeah,
But the Wu-Tang album throws a wrench in the works.
it does.
They deliberately created something unattainable, forcing us to confront the idea of music as a commodity, an investment, rather than just an artistic expression.
It's almost like they're asking, what are you really paying for? The music itself, the experience of listening, or the bragging rights of owning something nobody else can have.
Right.
It's a provocative question that challenges our entire understanding of what music is worth.
And it's a question that becomes even more complex when you consider the role of technology.
Oh,
In the past, rarity was tied to physical objects, but in the digital age, anyone can create a one-of-a-kind digital artifact.
that's a really interesting point. If anything can be replicated, if exclusivity becomes harder to define, what will that mean for the future of music collecting?
It's hard to say for sure, but it's a question worth pondering.
Well,
Will we see a shift towards valuing the experience of music more than the ownership of it?
maybe.
Will digital scarcity create a whole new market for collectors?
It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah.
But for now, let's go back to the tangible, the vinyl records that hold these stories, these moments in time. What can we learn from these high-priced records beyond their monetary value?
I think they remind us that music is more than just sound.
Right.
It's a vessel for emotions,
For sure.
for memories, for cultural moments.
Yeah.
It connects us to the past, to each other, and
Yeah.
into ourselves.
It's like each record is a time capsule holding a piece of the story, waiting to be unlocked.
Exactly. And while not everyone can afford to own a piece of that story in the form of a rare record, the beauty of music is that it's still accessible to all of us.
Yeah.
We can all experience the joy, the heartbreak, the inspiration that music offers,
Right.
regardless of the price tag.
That's a great point. So as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of crazy expensive vinyl, let's leave our listeners with a question to ponder.
Okay.
What truly makes music valuable to you? Is the ownership of a rare artifact or the emotional connection you have with the music itself? It's wild to think about how a simple acetate disc or a test pressing can become like these priceless artifacts. But at the end of the day, it's the music etched into those grooves that really matters, right? The stories those grooves tell.
That's what connects us to these artists, to these moments in time. Think about it. Elvis recording My Happiness as a young unknown artist.
Yeah.
The Beatles pushing boundaries with their music and their image. Wu-Tang Clan creating this almost mythical object that challenges how we even define music. These records are more than just collectibles. They're windows into the creative process, the cultural landscape, the evolution of an art form.
And it's fascinating how the Wu-Tang Clan, by creating this single copy, almost forced us to reevaluate what we consider valuable in music. Are we paying for the sounds, the experience, or the idea?
They tapped into this deep-seated human desire for the unique, the unattainable. It's like they gamified the whole concept of musical ownership, and it worked brilliantly.
It definitely sparked a conversation.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into these crazy expensive records, what's the takeaway for our listeners? What can they glean from all this?
I think it's a reminder that music holds value in so many different ways.
Yeah.
It's about the emotional connection, the historical significance, the artistry, and yes, sometimes even the monetary worth. But ultimately, the true value of music lies in its ability to move us, to inspire us, to connect us to something larger than ourselves.
Beautifully said. So whether you're spinning a rare first pressing or a thrift store, remember to appreciate the story behind the music, the journey it took to reach your ears, and maybe even ask yourself, what makes a piece of music truly valuable to you?
That's a great question to leave our listeners with.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of high-priced vinyl. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.